We're so far away that any radiation effects would dissipate by the time they released here. But it does offer, a cautionary tale.
President Obama learning some lessons from the nuclear fallout in Japan, but not changing anything when it comes to policy.
Cautionary indeed. Top Line begins right now.
Hello and welcome to ABC News Top Line. I'm Rick Klein.
And I'm Jonathan Karl.
Every day at noon Eastern, right here with all of our abundances of caution, bringing you the latest in politics. It's twitter.com/Rick Klein, twitter.com/John Karl. John, up on the Hill today, what has got your eye?
Well, I'm more parochial here, burning down the House. Did you notice, Rick, 54 Republicans voting against that resolution just to fund the government for the next 3 weeks. This was something that was a Republican leadership bill, of course, the support of John Boehner and the entire Republican leadership. But 54 Republicans defied that leadership, signaling potential real problems ahead for Boehner as this debate goes forward. And, Rick, don't blame the freshmen for this. Of those 54 Republican no votes, only 22 were freshmen. The rest were people that have been around here for a long time, people like Michelle Bachmann, Steve King, Mike Pence, and others who want to show that they're even more conservative than that freshman class. That's
right, and these 54 are a roadmap for the people that will be giving the biggest headaches to Speaker Boehner, particularly on the spending issue in the weeks to come. Next up today, it's PEACENIK. Haley Barbour, the governor of Mississippi, is playing something of a dove in the early 2012 field. He gave a speech yesterday calling for defense cuts and the beginnings of an Afghanistan troop withdrawal. Some interesting positions from Haley Barbour. These are things you don't often hear Republicans, much less Republican presidential candidates, talking about, John.
But I think there's really a potential opening there. You know, you've seen the support for the war in Afghanistan now down at about 30% in some polls. And, a lot of the conservative Tea Party types that have gotten active over the last couple of years are talking about small government, including small government when it comes to our operations in Afghanistan. So I think that there may be an opening there for Barbour. It's certainly something that nobody else of the Republican candidates is talking about, with the exception, of course, of Ron Paul. Next up, T-PAW. Tim Pawlenty wants you to know that he's really cool, and to show that, he's put out a new video. We're going to show you a little bit, but Rick, I got to warn you, this could be a little dangerous to watch at home. It's a little disturbing. Take a look.
The issue isn't, we the lobbyists, or we the special interests, or we the crony capitalists. It's we the people, and we're going to stand up for the people.
Apparently, Rick, Pawlenty's camera guys have a little bit of a drinking problem.
I think this is all about being as cool as you can. This is, this is what people film when they don't have tripods or any training, I suppose. And finally today, it's Sarah's slide. Sarah Palin has higher disapproval numbers inside the Republican Party than any of the major 2012 contenders. She's seen favorably by just 58% of Republicans in the new ABC News Washington Post poll. That is a 30-point drop below her high water mark that came right after the Republican convention in 2008. And now she's telling folks on Facebook that 2012 can't get here fast enough. I don't know if she means it.
Okay, Rick, the more people like you say things like that about Sarah Palin, the more likely she is to run. So I am going to step way out on a limb here, and I'm going to say, although the conventional wisdom is now firmly saying that Sarah Palin will not run for president, I say that she is now more likely to run than not. And on that note, somebody we are always happy to have on Top Line, Henry Waxman, the top Democrat on the Energy and Commerce Committee. We need to ask you about Japan, obviously. Are you going to be supporting a Sarah Palin campaign, though? You think that's a good idea?
I think she'd be a terrific Republican nominee.
I would imagine so. So on a much more serious note, you see the disaster unfolding in Japan with nuclear meltdown. I want to ask you, you've been somebody who's talked a lot about, obviously, energy issues, nuclear issues. It seems that nuclear energy is the only thing that the president and the Republicans really agree on when it comes to energy. But should this give us some pause about that?
I think we have to have a lot of concern about what's happening in Japan. Japan is an industrial first country capable of designing the most technologically able nuclear equipment. And yet they're looking like Chernobyl or close to it at the moment. We hope things will get under control quickly. But their plans are modeled exactly on ours. And so we need to learn why this happened in Japan, and whether we should put as much of our hopes for our energy future in the bag of nuclear energy. President Obama said he's for nuclear energy as part of a lot of other sources of clean burning fuel.
But he's not backing away from that, should he be? I mean,
No, he shouldn't. He shouldn't.
Really?
But if you look at that in contrast to the Republicans' budget proposal, they took $48 billion for loan guarantees for energy projects, slashed it, and put $18 billion left for nuclear, and only $1 billion for all the other areas of energy resources, whether it's efficiency or renewables. They're not for a balanced portfolio. Their idea is oil, coal, and nuclear. And I think that we need to be much broader in reducing our dependence on oil and coal because of the greenhouse gas effect. And we've got to recognize that we've got to make sure the nuclear is safe if we're going to expand it and rely on that as our major source of electricity.
Well, let's get into that question, Congressman. Bottom line, are you convinced that we are safe based on our existing nuclear facilities?
No, I can't reach that conclusion, nor can anybody at this point. We've got to learn why it happened in Japan the way it did. We've got to learn from that whether we are equipped to handle whatever catastrophe may occur. The industry tells us to relax, we're okay. I wouldn't take anything like that at face value. We're talking about gigantic consequences to the public health and safety if there's a nuclear catastrophe. So we've got to make sure that the existing plants that we have now have all the state-of-the-art plans for fail-safe to encounter a greater earthquake, a greater tsunami, a terrorist attack, whatever the case may be. And then we can continue to rely on nuclear, but I don't think we ought to put all our eggs in the nuclear basket. We've got to move toward renewables and efficiency and put a price on carbon so we move away from coal and oil, especially because of the national security consequences of our reliance on foreign oil.
So should we have something like a moratorium on new nuclear development here? I mean, you know, because there is this push now, and as you said, it's one of the things Republicans are still willing to fund, and the president's still on board. But should we take a step back and say, look, no more, you know, development of any new nuclear facilities until we take a look at what happened and if it could happen here?
I think that it would be a mistake to move forward with nuclear facilities without learning the lessons from Japan. I don't know whether there needs to be a moratorium because that could stop some that are almost ready to go online, but we need to make sure that all of them have all the fail-safe to deal with whatever emergency might come about. But the Republican energy strategy is not one that we can use for the future. They are so beholden to the special interests of the coal people and the oil people and the nuclear people that they refuse to think beyond that. They're just against everything, but they're not for a forward-looking energy policy for this country, which should be a lot more balanced and a portfolio of a lot different sources, so we're not all dependent on one.
And Mr. Waxman, I know you brought to your committee just yesterday a resolution to try to recognize climate change. All the Republicans voted against that. Is there any chance or any traction you can get behind another attempt to address climate change in this Congress, or you feel like the Republicans are just going to be, it's going to be a non-starter for them?
Well, the Republicans are trying to roll back the clock on dealing with climate change. The EPA is regulating under the Clean Air Act, as the Supreme Court told them they must if they found that there's an endangerment to public health and the environment. Now the Republicans don't like that because the coal and the oil and the other industries don't like it either, so they're trying to stop the EPA. But the way they do it is, first of all, to deny the science of climate change, to deny the science of carbon emissions. They specifically write that into their bill. So I offered an amendment saying, let's at least acknowledge that there's such a thing as carbon emissions that are causing climate change. And every single Republican voted against recognizing that there's a rise in temperature, that there is such a thing as global warming and climate. They just reject the science and want to do whatever these industries want them to do. This bill that they pass out of committee is not going to become law. I don't know if the Senate will even pass it, but certainly the president would veto it. But it's an embarrassment when they put their heads in the sand and say, there's no such thing as a climate change problem. We don't think it exists, and therefore you don't need to do anything about it. So they want to stop EPA from acting, and they don't want to legislate. I think we'll have a tough time legislating as far as I'd like to go, but there are some things we can do, and we have to do it on a bipartisan basis. I hope they'll be willing to work with us.
All right, Congressman Henry Waxman, Democrat of California.